Hello everyone and welcome to today's video. Today we're having a look at the 2025 New York City mayoral race and looking at the latest polls and polling averages in this race and how it's currently shaping up. So the 2025 New York City mayoral race, how did we get here? Well, in 2021, the Democratic candidate Eric Adams defeated Republican Curtis Sliwa to be elected the mayor of New York City. Over the course of his four-year tenure, Adams had a lot of scandals pop up, which made him very vulnerable to a challenge from other Democrats in the party in the Democratic primary. Ultimately, what ends up happening is Adams decides not to run for re-election as a Democrat. He runs as independent, and it's an open race on the Democratic side. Zohran Mamdani, the assemblyman from New York City, ends up winning the Democratic primary in a shocking upset of former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. And now we have a general election where it was Zohran Mamdani, Mayor Eric Adams, Republican nominee from 2021 Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo running as a third-party candidate. Now, some recent news has happened that Eric Adams has dropped out of the race. So now where things stand is that we have a three-way matchup of Democrat Zohran Mamdani, Republican Curtis Sliwa, and Andrew Cuomo running as an independent third-party candidate in this race, hoping to upset Zohran Mamdani. Now, as for the general election overall, the way things currently stand is that Zohran Mamdani in the Decision Desk HQ polling aggregate is leading by 18 points over Cuomo and Sliwa and Eric Adams. Now, Adams, as I mentioned on September 28th, did withdraw from the race. We have not seen any polls as of the time recording this video without Adams in this race, though we can expect that even with Adams' 8.1%, Mamdani would still be leading in this race and would likely still be leading by more than double digits. Assuming Adams' support essentially is split between the three candidates, even if a lot of that support does go to Andrew Cuomo, Mamdani is certainly going to have a very large double-digit lead. So that's his Decision Desk HQ. On Real Third Politics, Zohran Mamdani has 44.6%, Curtis Sliwa at 12.4%, Andrew Cuomo in second at 26.8%, Eric Adams 7.6%. So these two polling averages have Mamdani right around 18 points with an average of a 17.9% lead. Now, based on the rating scale that I use here, which is 15 points and more being safe, in between 15 and 5 being likely, in between 5 and 1 being lean, and 1 and under being tilt, that would put the New York City mayoral race right now in a safe Democratic win for Zohran Mamdani. And right now, it certainly seems to be shaping up that way. This race has been very consistent over the last few months or so since Mamdani became the Democratic nominee, which is he's been overwhelmingly the favorite to win this race. A large part being is the way the vote is being split. Roughly 44% of the vote is a part of Zohran Mamdani's support, leaving about 55% withstanding. Now, 8.8%, around 9% of the vote, is undecided or third-party candidate at this current point in time, but even still, a lot of that anti-Zohran Mamdani vote is being split across Andrew Cuomo, Curtis Sliwa, and Eric Adams. Now, Adams has withdrawn from the race, but Cuomo and Sliwa are still in it. And when you combine the polling averages of 26.6 for Cuomo, 11.9 for Sliwa, you get around 38 to 39% or so when you combine those numbers. Essentially meaning even if one of them dropped out in support of the other candidate, Zohran Mamdani, in all likelihood, would still be leading the race, given how much support he has and how much support the other two candidates have added up. Now, Eric Adams dropping out plays an important role because some of that support will likely go to Cuomo and Sliwa and may make this race a little bit closer. I don't think the 18-point lead from Mamdani would ultimately stand when we see new polls come out here. But the reality is, with Cuomo and Sliwa in the race going up against Mamdani, there's not enough percent vote out there to stop Zohran Mamdani in this race. Now, what's interesting about this race is this has taken a look at what the general election looks like in head-to-head matchups if one of Cuomo or Sliwa drops out before Election Day in November. And the way it's looking right now still has been pretty clear. We see a poll from Marist University in September 8th through the 11th, and it shows Mamdani still leading Andrew Cuomo by around 10 points, with 7% saying other and 5% undecided. So the argument that even if Curtis Sliwa would drop out and it becomes a head-to-head race of Mamdani versus Cuomo, the polls suggest that Mamdani would still win and possibly still win by double digits. Emerson College also did a matchup like this around that same time, September 7th and 8th, and it showed in the matchup of Mamdani versus Cuomo a closer matchup, 47-40, but again, Mamdani leading. Now, 13% of the vote is undecided in that matchup, so there is enough support for Cuomo to win, but he would need to win a large amount of those undecided voters to do so. Whereas again, Mamdani being around 47% puts him in a very strong position in a crowded race to potentially win here. Now, it also shows what a matchup for Mamdani versus Sliwa would look like. 52-28 with 20% undecided. Mamdani already has enough support to win there. And a reason why Eric Adams dropped out for Mamdani versus Adams, 51-30. So again, Eric Adams, the polling became very clear he did not have a path to winning this race. New York Times also did a matchup like this. Now in this one, it was only a 4-point lead for Mamdani versus Cuomo, 48-44 with 7% undecided. But for Adams versus Mamdani, 55-36. That's where things stand on the recent polling. In the way the race is currently going, Zohran Mamdani will be the next mayor of New York City. The amount of vote that Cuomo and Sliwa are splitting is just too much at this current point in time. Even with Eric Adams out of the race, the math is not there to catch Zohran Mamdani. Now, in the hypothetical scenario where, say, Sliwa ends up dropping out and supports Cuomo, if most of his support goes to Cuomo, then it's a fighting chance. Then Cuomo could potentially defeat Mamdani, but even then, I am still skeptical. I actually do think Zohran Mamdani at this point in time would still end up winning that mayoral election. And a large part of this goes back to the scandals that Cuomo had when he was governor of New York, so much so that it hurt his chances in the Democratic primary as well. So I think we're seeing some clear evidence here that Zohran Mamdani, around 45% of the vote, is in a strong position to be the next mayor of New York City. And even if Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa consolidated around one of the two, there's really still not enough vote out there to stop Zohran Mamdani at this current point in time. It should also be worth noting that Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa also have shown no willingness for one of them to drop out and support the other either. So until that happens, we can essentially just mark that as mute and say that's probably not going to happen. So the polling data is an 18-point lead for Zohran Mamdani. Now, as for how this election is going to look potentially as well. Well, first things first, we can look at the 2021 results of Eric Adams versus Curtis Sliwa. Now, New York City is an overwhelmingly Democratic area. Not much of a surprise here. Eric Adams won by a very large margin, winning 67.4% of the vote. Curtis Sliwa got 27.9%. And when you look at the race, every single borough except for Staten Island voted for the Democrat Eric Adams. Brooklyn went 71-23 for Adams, Queens 60-35, Manhattan 81-14, the Bronx 76-20. Staten Island did vote for Curtis Sliwa, 66.5 to 28.8. Now, when you're looking at this race, it's going to be interesting because just based, even with the polls that clearly show Zohran Mamdani winning here, this is going to be one of the more competitive elections that we've seen in New York City for a while now. Essentially, when you look at the polling data, you have Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani, essentially two Democratic candidates splitting some of the Democratic vote. Now, Mamdani is clearly getting a larger share of that Democratic vote, and Cuomo is even likely cutting into some of Curtis Sliwa's Republican vote from 2021, but certainly looks like some of the Democratic vote is being split. So by the margins, we're going to see a more competitive race, where you're going to see places in this election that we saw in 2021, like when Brooklyn was 71-23, this time around it could be something like Mamdani getting 50, Cuomo getting maybe 35, and then Sliwa getting like 10 or 15 or something like that. So you may see some vote splitting and some smaller margins of victories in these areas because Mamdani and Cuomo are essentially two Democrats splitting the vote in these areas. So when you look through these counties, the only one that I'm really confident could be won by either Cuomo or Curtis Sliwa is Staten Island. Now, this is going to be very interesting because Staten Island is a more Republican area. Curtis Sliwa did win it by 66.5%. And if it was Sliwa versus Cuomo, I think we would still probably see Curtis Sliwa win this area. Now, the question is going to be, how does this go with the vote splitting with Mamdani and with Cuomo and with Curtis Sliwa? I personally think that Curtis Sliwa will still probably win Staten Island, but I think he'll do it by a very narrow margin. It's possibly Curtis Sliwa ends up maybe losing this county or borough as well to Andrew Cuomo as kind of we don't want Zohran Mamdani as mayor, so we'll vote for Cuomo this time around. But again, given it's such a Republican area, I think we see Staten Island ultimately go for a Curtis Sliwa. The rest of these boroughs is going to be really tough. For instance, Manhattan, 81.1% for Eric Adams last time, without a doubt, very Democratic area. Now, we actually do have the Democratic primary, which, again, Democratic primary, even though New York City is very Democratic, the general election will be a little bit less friendly towards Mamdani and the Democrats like Cuomo and such in the general election. Now that Mamdani is the leading Democratic candidate, this may be a little less representative, but this is what we saw. Brooklyn ended up being an 18-point win for Mamdani versus Cuomo. Queens, 46-38 for Mamdani versus Cuomo, more competitive at 8-point win. Manhattan, only 5 points, 39-34. And then you see Cuomo winning in the Bronx, 52%, and you see Staten Island going for Cuomo, 46-38 in the Democratic primary. So this is going to be interesting here, because of the 3 boroughs that voted for Zohran Mamdani, the most Andrew Cuomo-friendly one was actually Manhattan. So what that suggests that when we're talking about this race for the general election for New York City, we could be watching Manhattan as potentially the best base of support for Andrew Cuomo of the 3 that did vote for Zohran Mamdani. Now, again, it's possible Andrew Cuomo could win Staten Island in this race over Curtis Sliwa, especially considering in the polls, Curtis Sliwa is only getting around 12 to 13% support, whereas Andrew Cuomo is getting in the high 20s to low 30s in most polls. So maybe the vote split that Curtis Sliwa got back in 2021, where he got like 66%, maybe that's split. Maybe he only gets 30% of the vote. Maybe Cuomo gets like 30% of the vote, and Mamdani gets around 20-25% of the vote. Maybe it's a very narrow split here, but given its Republican DNA, I do think it nearly stays red. The question is going to be, what does Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx do? Now, the Bronx did give Cuomo his largest floor of support here, and it is a very Democratic area. Now, Cuomo did defeat Mamdani here, so I think if we're going to see a borough that ultimately votes for Cuomo over Mamdani, I think the Bronx is the area we're watching most likely to do it. The second most likely one, as the map suggests, I think would be Manhattan. Now, Manhattan's going to be interesting because Mamdani did win it, getting 39%, and Brad Lander, who essentially had a unity pact with Mamdani to stop Andrew Cuomo, got 17% of the vote here. So to me, that says, yes, Cuomo made it a 5-point race, but there were a lot of voters in Manhattan in the Democratic primary that still voted essentially with Zohran Mamdani rather than voting for Andrew Cuomo. So could Andrew Cuomo win Manhattan against Zohran Mamdani in the general election? Yes, he could. But are there a lot of voters that don't want to see Andrew Cuomo win Manhattan? Yes, there absolutely is. Whereas Queens and Brooklyn, Queens was actually very close, 46-38 for Mamdani versus Cuomo, with Brad Lander getting 6 points as well. Brooklyn, 49-31 for Mamdani versus Cuomo. So based on the polls right now, just going to the general election map here, the polling averages suggest Zohran Mamdani should win the New York City mayoral race by a safe margin, over 15 points. Now, with Eric Adams out of the race, the polls could certainly change and maybe narrow up, possibly falling under 15 points. But as of where things currently stand today, with the polling data, Zohran Mamdani would be projected to win by more than 15 points. As for how I think that goes down on the borough level, again, I think we're going to see something where Curtis Sliwa narrowly finds a way to win Staten Island due to it being so red in the general election. It constantly votes red at the presidential level and the mayoral level. So I do think we're going to ultimately see Curtis Sliwa win in Staten Island, and I think based on this polling data, he would still probably win here. Now for Mamdani versus Cuomo, I think we're going to see, number one, Mamdani win Kings. I think we're going to see him win there. Manhattan, it's going to be a fight between Mamdani and Cuomo, but again, if Mamdani's winning by around 18 points in the polls, we're probably going to see Manhattan go blue, and then we're also going to see Queens probably go blue as well. It's going to be more competitive than Manhattan and Kings, but I think we see Queens ultimately go blue. Whereas Cuomo giving a strong showing in the primary, I think it is possible Cuomo ekes out a win in the Bronx. This is what it currently looks like right now, both in my prediction and the latest polling data and polling averages for New York City, with Mamdani winning 3 of the 5 boroughs, Sliwa winning 1, and Cuomo winning 1. And ultimately it ends up being an 18-point win, a safe Democratic win for Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani's elected the next mayor of New York City. That's all I have for you in today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure to hit like. Also, make sure to hit subscribe, as I post at least one new video every single day. My channel also just recently broke 6,000 subscribers, so I'm trying to get to 7,000 as well. So I'd really appreciate if you can hit like on the video and hit subscribe as well to help YouTube recommend the video to other people maybe interested in watching, like yourself. Also, make sure to stay tuned, as I have some exciting videos planned for October, heading through election night 2025, with some big election night videos on New Jersey's governor's race, Virginia's governor's race, and New York City mayoral race. I'm planning to do election night simulations for all 3 of those, so you're not going to want to miss out on those. Thank you so much for watching again. I really appreciate it and hope to see you in a future video.